Imagine a world tucked behind towering minarets, fragrant courtyards, and the gold splash splendor of Ottoman palaces. A world few dared to name out loud. This wasn't a realm built on military campaigns or political intrigue. It was ruled by desire. In this hidden world, young boys weren't molded into scholars or soldiers. They were taught something far more delicate and far more dangerous. They were trained in charm, beauty, and obedience. Not slaves, not warriors. These were the Sultan's male concubines, handpicked, polished to perfection, admired like works of art, and eventually discarded like them too. Within the palace, they weren't kept in secret. Quite the opposite. They were symbols of taste and power, paraded through corridors as living proof of refinement and dominance. Their presence wasn't taboo, it was fashionable. Most people, when they picture a harem, see veiled women reclining behind silk curtains. But that's only one part of the story. Across empires, Persia, China, Greece, young men were also kept close, not for war, but for warmth. The Ottomans followed suit. To the elite, having beautiful male companions was a mark of status, not shame. But admiration didn't mean protection. In fact, it often masked control. Behind every silk robe was a quiet prison. Behind every soft touch, uncertainty, vulnerability, and silence. Take the story of Tahir and Tib, two stunning boys from Ottoman lands, captured by Christian nobles. You'd expect chains and torment. Instead, their captors fell for them, lavished them with gifts, spoiled them, loved them. For a brief time, it seemed like love could defy nations and religions. But the world had other ideas. Neither the Christian West nor the Muslim East could accept what these boys represented. Their affection was labeled deviant, their bond, a threat, their punishment, disgrace, separation, imprisonment. And this was no isolated tale. It was one of many. Throughout the empire, boys as young as 8 were chosen for their grace and potential. Many were taken from conquered lands and brought to the palace, where their new life began. Under heavy surveillance, they were taught music, poetry, court manners, and above all, how to please. These boys were called Yamaks. They lived apart from the rest, under strict watch. Their beauty made them valuable, but only for as long as it lasted. Foreign visitors, like Venetian envoy Benedetto Ramberti, were astonished by the sheer number of them. Hundreds of boys, seen not as children, but as decorative extensions of royal power. Sultans and officials openly kept them as companions, and no one flinched. That's because the Ottomans didn't define love by gender, but by roles. It wasn't about gay or straight. It was about who held control and who yielded to it. Still, in a world where dominance was everything, love had no real shelter. Even among the Janissaries, elite warriors, such relationships existed, but always in the shadows. Because in the empire of beauty and obedience, affection was allowed, until it became too real. For many of these boys, being chosen by the palace meant escaping the crushing weight of poverty. It meant silk instead of rags, music lessons instead of hunger, and an entry into a world of opulence that few could even imagine. They were fed well, dressed in finery, and taught the ways of quarries or of court life. For the men who kept them close, it offered something else entirely: graceful companionship, prestige, and beauty always within reach. Some of these boys, known as Yamaks, were even granted privileges like tax exemptions, rewards for loyalty and service. From the outside, it looked like a dream. But dreams can be cages too. Nothing happened without the Sultan's approval. He controlled who entered this world, who rose within it, and who vanished from view. Every promotion, every favor, even romantic liaisons, all were subject to his final word. Most Yamaks never set foot beyond the palace gates until the court deemed them ready for politics, for marriage, or simply to disappear. But the empire was no longer untouched by the outside world. As Western diplomats and their ideas began to flow into Istanbul, so too did a new sense of morality. Concepts like shame, sin, and propriety began to color Ottoman views of desire. What was once celebrated now felt suspect. By the 18th century, the world that had once proudly paraded its favorites began to retreat into silence. The age of the Yamak was fading, pushed to the edges of memory. Same-sex relationships didn't vanish, they just went underground. What had once been painted in poetry and gold was now wrapped in secrecy and fear. And then came the breaking point. The Penal Code of 1858. Under this new law, anyone who acted against modesty in public could be imprisoned or fined. The wording was vague, but its intent was clear. In Istanbul, the shift was fast and brutal. Men were attacked in the streets, their heads shaved in shame. Some were even assaulted to send a message. The empire would no longer tolerate what it once embraced. People asked, why now? The Quran hadn't changed. Ottoman tradition had long coexisted with these relationships. So what sparked the outrage? Most historians point to the same cause: Western pressure. Along with technology and science, Europe had exported its guilt. Where the Ottomans once saw fluidity, the West saw sin. Where the court once nurtured beauty, it now saw corruption. Slowly, Ottoman society began to look at itself through foreign eyes. And yet, not everyone bowed to this new moral order. Tahir and Tib, the same boys whose story we visited earlier, had fallen deeply for the very men who had once captured them. When the Ottoman court condemned them for sodomy, they were imprisoned. Their lovers remained behind bars even after their release. But the bond held. In a desperate act of love, the Christian noblemen escaped, found their companions, and converted to Islam, hoping it would buy them a new beginning. But the world had already changed. The golden age of the beloved had vanished. By the end of the 19th century, boys like Tahir and Tib were no longer at the center of palace life. Women now held that role. Affection shifted. The gaze of the court had moved on. One Ottoman writer, Ahmed Cevdet Pasha, captured the shift with quiet bitterness. Woman lovers have increased in number, while boy beloveds have decreased. It is as if the people of Lot have been swallowed by the earth. And just like that, an entire world disappeared. Much of what followed remains unrecorded. Too controversial, too inconvenient. But the stories didn't die. If you know where to look, they're still there. Quiet traces in forgotten manuscripts, paintings and crumbling palace walls. Stories of boys adored and discarded, of men who risked everything to feel something real. Of a world gilded in beauty, but built on silence. Tahir and Tib's story is more than a footnote. It's proof that love, even in the harshest conditions, finds a way. Whether glowing in the warmth of a palace chamber or hidden in the gloom of a prison, it doesn't vanish. It bends, it waits, it endures. And sometimes, against all odds, it escapes. So tell us, was this world a rare expression of tolerance, or just a beautiful illusion hiding something much darker? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more forgotten histories from the edges of empire, like, subscribe, and join us as we keep digging.